Um, all right. So this is the second session of Karma and Emptiness, which is a four-part series that gives us an overview of karma and specifically how to work with karmic ripenings that cause suffering in existence and working with them in the sense of skillfully learning about the topic in its connection to emptiness, and then how to work with meditation practices that will end suffering. And it's possible to end suffering completely with this course of action, if you will. So let me share. I have to ask for the screen to be shared. Mhm. Okay, here we go. All right. So what's on the screen is what I've already stated. This is the second session of the four-part session. So this is an overview just to refocus us on what we're doing in this course. Um, so follow this and try to hold it in your mind as we move forward, understanding what I call the diagnostic framework. That's for like the entire course, and frankly, everything that has to do with Buddhism. It's the Four Noble Truths. And specifically, we're using the Wheel of Life and even more specifically the 12 links of dependent origination, which we went through last session. So if you missed last session, you have to go back and review that to maybe get real clarity on how this is being used as a diagnostic framework. Because we don't have time to review it again tonight. There's too much to cover. Um, and then that leads to understanding suffering and as a process to engage in as a human being. We have the opportunity to treat suffering. So here we talk about treating it as a disease. Sort of relates to the wording diagnostic framework. Here we're talking about the disease that's shown in the Wheel of Life, that's understood through the lens of the Four Noble Truths, which is the operation in our mind stream constantly of the three poisons and how they lead to karmic ripenings. And then the third point here is identifying its cause. And that's ignorance. We covered that as well. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the beginning of tonight's session. But that's the cause. And specifically, I put parenthetically there that not seeing, not understanding, and further not seeing emptiness, which is the antidote. So here, the next thing is we confirm that there's a cure actually exists. We do this by understanding Buddhist principles, which we get through teachings and reflection and meditation, specifically on karma and emptiness. And that's the reason for this course. It's very compact and consolidated. It's like we can really expand and expound on this topic, which we could meet every Tuesday forever and talk about new aspects of this particular topic. And then the last bullet point has to do with what we call prescribing the medicine, the antidote, which is the specific meditation practices on emptiness. So that's just sort of reframing what this course is endeavoring to do. Here we're specifically endeavoring to discover the wisdom of emptiness, which in Buddhism is represented by the manifested form of the Buddha, known as Manjushri, which is the Buddha of wisdom. And it's nice to see an image of this represented in this manifested form. For those of you who are familiar with Manjushri, the sword in his right hand is the sword of wisdom, cutting through ignorance. And the text that's sitting on a lotus flower in his left hand, arising from his left hand, I should say, is the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. So then the lotus petal is also symbolic because it's arising out of compassion, which is important in Buddhism. So just to reframe what we're going to be really focusing on tonight, last time we showed this same graphic. It's the wheel of life, especially focused on the outer rim. These two um, topics, the first two links of the 12 links of dependent origination. Um, and we're going to talk about them a little bit more in detail tonight, which will lead us into finishing out the framing of what we really need to understand clearly before I start to explain the actual antidote, which are the meditation practices that are specifically geared towards ending suffering permanently. So this is just to remind us that there are the 12 links, and that we'll be focusing in on these in terms of what we're trying to break. So here the 12 links are stated. This is in text form, in outline form. I went through this last week, so again, we won't go through it in detail. This is just to put the presence of the 12 links fresh in your mind as we go about this presentation tonight. And they're called the three thorough afflictions, as they're grouped as ignorance, leading to action, and then leading to the actual production of suffering that goes on and on and on in the wheel of life. So we focused in our last session on the first two links: ignorance, which is the lack of understanding true nature of things, leading to action or karmic formations. So here it's important for us to really focus on these two because as we look at the first one, we have the image of a blind person moving forward with a cane, kind of groping forward because they can't actually see clearly. And this represents a fundamental lack of understanding the true nature of all things, meaning their emptiness. And in its place, the mistaken identifying of all arisings having inherent existence, self-standing essence that doesn't depend on anything else for its existence. So we have to keep that in our mind as we go into the rest of what we're going to be talking about tonight. We also have to keep in mind that that leads to the second link, which is something called karmic actions or karmic formations. Um, and then this is represented by a potter forming a vase. And it's important that we understand that what that represents is that this is represents that with the engagement of all things that we do blindly, represented by the first link, all movements of our mind are in the process of generating activities of body, speech, and mind for the future. We're shaping them. They're in process. The energy is in process, not yet fully formed. So it's important that we understand that karmic formations are actually, as I said, it says here, individual movements of the mind that once completed. In Buddhism, they're called actions, but they're really the formation, karmic formations, the movement of the mind that occur through the lens of ignorance, grasping to objects other than itself. And that, when fully formed, causes what we call karmic imprints or seeds to then be planted in that mind. Um, and it's a fully formed image. It's a word we use often, and you'll see it come up and hear it come up later on in this presentation. Remember that, or an energy that's in our mind, excuse me, that will ripen in the future. That leads, we're just going to talk not about all 12 links, but the first three or four. That leads to fully formed karmic imprints, what we just talked about, which becomes the first part of the third link. There's two parts to the third link, very important. First part is called the causal consciousness. Causal meaning that these are the karmic imprints themselves, which become the cause for future ripening or resultant effects of the actions taken initially by an ignorant mind, grasping to things as having inherent existence, and then creating those karmic imprints. So the second part of that is when that those imprints actually the energy of them go into action. They're known as we know them in karma as cause and effect or cause and result. This is the result part, the effect part, projecting karma in this context, because we're talking about the 12 links of dependent origination that lead to the creation of life. So projecting karma propels us into and through the intermediate bardo state. And then it becomes the second part of the third link called the resulting consciousness when rebirth happens. This is actually what we think of as consciousness. From a Sutrayana point of view, it's this consciousness that at the time of death, actual death, when the mind is still, no longer moving, but then when it starts to move again because of the energy of the karmic imprints that it has on it, in it, seated in it, karmic imprints, that's the energy that causes the mind to move, and it's that projecting karma, that energy that moves it into the bardo, the state between lifetimes. Some of you maybe know about this in more detail. In Tantrayana or Vajrayana, then this is called the most subtle wind in mind. So two related systems, but thought of a little differently. Most important thing to remember here is that it's the second part, the resultant consciousness versus the cause consciousness, which is the first part of this third link. And then this is what actually connects past actions previous to that death experience, that when that death occurred, which means that the mind is still no longer functioning, no longer has arisings. Then when it starts to move again, it's the energy that gets it to move is the projecting karma. It's what connects past actions to a new life, mental and physical. And that leads to the fourth um, link, which is called name and form. And it's represented by a monkey um, swinging from a tree. And this symbolizes uncontrolled jumping of consciousness. We have one thing we need to know about karma as we move forward is that karmic ripenings are what takes place once one is born into a new life as a human, we're talking about here now. Um, Karmic ripenings are the energy that are moving right from conception, forming the body, forming the presence, not forming, but bringing into that the presence of the subtle mind and body that then after birth actually are as manifested as a physical, psychophysical being, if you will. And you could see there, and then the karmic ripenings are what are occurring every split second. Many, 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 many karmic ripenings. And we like to think of them in the sense of being uh, in this image here of the monkey moving because they they're uncontrolled. You don't even know they're happening. The only way to really experience them is in deep meditation, is to have develop mindfulness and awareness using single pointed concentration. So you could see a note that I put here in on the screen that I said in our last session, one of our attendees, Linda, brought up the uh, amygdala. I don't pronounce words too well. Amygdala, I think that's how you say it, which is part of the construct of the brain that motivates and moves us from a scientific, a neuroscience point of view. moves all of our actions forward. And one can read details analysis of them. We don't have time to do that tonight, but it was great that Linda brought that up because as we talk about the manifestation into name and form, the fourth link here of the mind-body complex, then and I talk about karmic ripenings just occurring on a level that is not under our control. It's very similar to and analogous to the way the amygdala operates from a neuroscience point of view. So it's an interesting point. Not too much of a main focus of our talk here, but it does underscore how the presence of karmic ripenings are present, manifested all the way through the physical um, our physical existence at a very primal level from a brain science, neuroscience point of view. Interesting point. So, as I said, this leads into this form called, the fourth link called name and form. That's represented by a person in a boat or people in a boat, and that represents this mind-body complex. So, if you could just follow how from the blind person and what that represents, leading to the potter in the process of making a vase or a pot, and how that leads to the formation of karmic um, imprints, how that further manifests in actual karmic ripenings, and then can manifest in the form represented by the fourth link of what's labeled name and form. And it's important we remember the word name here because it is about consciousness and physical form, mind body complex, right? So, as it says here, signifies a combination of mental, name, physical form components. So, here I just wanted us to take a moment to drill down and understand. And this is looking at it from, ultimately looking at it from a Prasangika Mahayamika point of view, which is a very specific way of looking at how things exist and how they don't exist. So here, when we talk about name, it refers to the four mental aggregates, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. And form, I should have that also bold, refers to the physical body and matter. So the context here is that it follows the consciousness link, which we already talked about, and is followed by the manifestation of the six sense spaces. That's the fifth link. And so this is important because in the context of rebirth, it represents the development of the fetus in the womb. All the consciousnesses, meaning the five sense consciousnesses and the main mental consciousness, those are your six sense spaces, um, becoming fully functional in a body and mind when you're actually born. So if your karmic ripenings um, are of a nature that can create a fully intact, fully functional body and mind, that's a very fortunate birth. And further, if the karma has in that mind stream virtuous qualities, then one can have much happiness, be it temporarily, in both a physical, in both a name and form way. So it's important to see how this all comes to life, if you will. So understanding the significance of name and form, uh, understanding that name and form is impermanent, it conventionally exists by a nominal mere name, conventionally exist. Nothing more than what we call dependent arising, whose true nature is empty. Understanding that starts to break the illusion of a solid, permanent, inherently existing self, which reduces and eventually, as Nagarjuna contends, we talked about this in our last session, that is a way to start the end and actually end attachment and then suffering. So, in essence, name and form is the materialized, sentient, and thinking organism that dependently arises from initial karmic consciousness, way back in link three. Not way back, it's the previous link, setting the stage for experience in the world through the senses in a mistaken way. And that's really important to know because that goes back to how everything arises, as we've explained it thus far through the first link, which is mistakenly experiencing everything in name and form as having inherent self-existence. So this is what I call the big mistake, if you will. So this mistaken name and form is right at the crux of thinking that the mere I that we experience conventionally every single moment, we mix that up with and think that that's actually inherently self-existing. Everything we experience everything that way. But the two aren't the same. We're mixing them up. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we move forward tonight, because without understanding that, we can't actually properly do the meditations on realizing emptiness. So it's mistakenly thinking that this name and form, what we talk about in Buddhism as the mere I that does exist conventionally, um, that it's the mistake that we're trying to remove of mistakenly and mixing up with our experience of things being inherently existent. We're not trying to remove um, our experience of the mere I because it does exist. We're trying to untangle it from how we think things exist because of ignorance. So this is a subtle point in the Prasangika Mahayamika point of view. You need to get it. It's really important. Um, so we'll get into that a bit. Um, so here we'll move on. And the way we're going to end up once we get there is we will, after we get through with our framing out and clarifying, which is what we're doing tonight, which is a continuation of what we started last session. We will get to in the last two sessions, dipping into connecting how what we learned and framed out in these first two sessions can be dynamically connected to and motivating to moving us to learning how to do the sevenfold reasoning, diamond slivers, and most importantly, dependent arising emptiness meditation practices. So this is where we're headed here, in case it feels like we might be getting a little lost, which we're not. So that's what we're talking about here. So remember that the foundation for doing these meditation practices on emptiness are the Four Noble Truths, um, and 12 links of dependent origination. And of course, as we show them present in the Wheel of Life. Um, so the real antidote goes back to that graphic I showed earlier. The real medicine is we need to cut off the first link, which starts the whole generation of a certain kind of mistaken energy into um, a dynamic presence in our consciousness that has existed since beginningless time, and that is ignorance. And so the antidote, the direct antidote, as I shared in some of the verses we put up on the screen last session, first session, Nagarjuna tells us that if we end ignorance, we end suffering. Pretty profound, but pretty direct. So that the topic isn't easy. So we don't have time to sort of for me to talk too much about this, but it's important to note that once one starts to have an understanding of the foundation, the framing out and the context of the antidote, why we do these emptiness meditations, what they can lead to. Once we start engaging in these practices, it can sometimes be a slippery slope. We sometimes can intellectually understand this framing out and even the process that I'm going to unfold this evening. It could be very clear. Other times it could slip away. And there's reasons for that. The main antidote is to learn the meditations on emptiness based on the understanding that one has from reading and reflecting, attending a class like this, reading the classic text that I showed at the beginning of the series that this teaching's based on, and reflecting, and then actually doing the meditation practices that again we just showed a few moments ago, over and over and over. It takes time because we're talking about removing what's called an innate mistaken identification of things inherently existing. Innate meaning they've been karmic formations that have taken place based on that mistaken lens of experiencing things for every single sentient being's consciousness since beginningless time. So it takes some effort. It's a powerful antidote, but it still takes some effort, repeated effort. So that's my little pep talk to say, once you understand how these practices are connected to karma and how they can be a skillful way to end karma and therefore end suffering, then engaging with them is still working hard. Some of you who've attended my classes previously have heard me talk about the analogy of like just even physically getting in shape and making that commitment, that maybe that New Year's resolution where you commit to an exercise program, a yoga regime, going to the gym and having a trainer help you get into physical shape. Then you can't just go once. You can't just, and think you're going to be in shape. You have to go, 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 keep going. It doesn't, once you stop, it falls off. So it's similar, very similar when you're doing emptiness meditations that you need to be able to make the same kind of commitment. And it's not enough to study and reflect on what you've learned. You have to actually engage in the meditation practices. So that's my pep talk for tonight in terms of what we need to do. So as we move forward now, I touched on this when we ended our first session. Who or what actually carries these karmic seeds or karmic imprints? So, in order to get to that tonight, we sort of have to frame out um, our understanding of, we should have a little bit better understanding of karmic seeds now, but we need to frame out a little bit more our understanding of uh, what the object of negation is, how to go about keeping it straight and not confusing it with the conventionally existing um, mere I, nominally existing mere I, not just as I relates to ourself, but all phenomena, and some of the nuance that goes with that. So we're going to talk through a little bit of that before we get to that, answering that question. So first thing we have to do is refine our understanding of the object of negation. Inherent existence. We already know that's the object of negation. We talked about that last session. How do we refine this? So it's ultimately it's through the prescribed meditations, right? But the nature of this object is what isn't, sorry, understanding that what the nature is of this object and what isn't this object has to be very clear. So the question is, what do we search for? Here we're going to use the concept of I. So does the I exist inherently? So this is something that we have to reach a conclusion of on. Is the I that is it the I that we're negating? So here we should now understand from what I've already presented last time and this time that the object that we're negating is inherent self-existence. And so that is what we're searching for in these meditations. Does the I exist inherently? That is the I that we are negating. Um, so does it mean, though, as I have up here currently on the screen, does it mean that the I doesn't exist? It doesn't exist inherently. The I does conventionally exist, what we call the mere I. It is not what we search for and negate in these meditation practices. If we do, then um, we're going to be doing basically emptiness meditation incorrectly. It's just going to be a wrong application. So this is what I have up on the screen now. If we think we're looking for the I that nominally exists, merely exists conventionally, then this is considered the wrong application of reasoning analysis of the ultimate. We talked about that being the definition of what type of tool we're using in these kind of meditations, reasoning analysis of the ultimate. So here, when we talk about reasoning analysis, it has to be qualified by the ultimate, not the conventional. When analysis is done correctly, we can say that the I does not exist inherently. It is empty of inherent existence. But we're talking about the ultimate. It does exist conventionally in a dependent arising mode. So the problem is the mistaken conception. This goes back to what I said a few minutes ago, that if we um, think that the mere I is what we're negating, then it's a big mistake. That's a very big mistake. That's not what um, we're trying to that means we're approaching the cliff of nihilism, which is a big no-no and it is really off the rails. So identifying what exists what inherently exists, um, if it what inherent existence would be if it existed is really, really important because this also helps us to avoid taking on the wrong object of negation when we're doing reasoned analysis of the ultimate. So there are two ways we have to really know this. There's two ways that uh, uh, we experience um, existence. One is called the appearance of it, inherent existence. That's that mistaken appearance that is constantly in our mind. That exists. If you're experiencing it, you can't say it doesn't exist. That would be silly. And then there's inherent existence, which does not exist. So, an example that's typically used is flowers in the sky. I can describe for you flowers existing in the sky. I can really get very poetic about it and paint this beautiful picture. You can conceptually see that in your mind. And then we could say that that exists. It exists in the sense that conceptually it exists as it's been put forth by someone conceptually. Does it exist inherently? No. Flowers in the sky do not exist. So This is a typical example. There are many, many examples, but if you conflate the two, you might end up negating the appearance of inherent existence. And what you're really trying to do is negate inherent existence. Because again, the challenge here is distinguishing between the two. So just remember to try to keep that in your mind. And why is it important? It's important to um, try to let's make sure I don't skip over this. Okay. Yes. It's important to distinguish between the two because it ensures that we negate the object, the actual object of negation, and not an existent phenomena when we meditate on emptiness. It also, this is another point that sometimes isn't talked about too much. His Holiness the Dalai Lama makes this point that it enables us to better understand what Buddhists perceive. So, what does he mean by that? Uh, His Holiness. So, in a text I have here by him, it says it enables us to better understand what Buddhists perceive. Um, and he says further, um, in that inherent existence does not appear to Buddha's minds from their side, from their own side, because Buddhists have abandoned cognitive obscurations. Those are the final obstacles to being able to see emptiness directly, the true nature of things directly. But he makes the point that, but Buddhas do perceive the appearance of it. And remember that word, appearance of inherent existence and all existence are known by the Buddha's omniscient mind. So I kind of slow down on that point because it underscores the importance of understanding that we're not negating when we discover emptiness, first inferentially and then eventually um, directly. Um, because that's not the object of negation. It doesn't have anything to do with what appears in one's mind when one sees emptiness directly, whether it's inferentially or directly, because the mere eye is not the object of negation. So when a Buddha reaches the point of not seeing um, inherent existence in anything from a Buddha's own side, then it's addressing this point directly that they perfected being able to see emptiness directly, but that never negates the mere I that exists nominally in all dependent arising phenomena. So this is a very important point to keep in your mind. It also might help you understand what we're talking about here. So this is sometimes can sound and get a little academic, but hopefully it's not too academic. I'm trying not to make it an academic topic. So the next important thing here is that, okay, so if we could keep that clear in our mind, the difference between the two, what is ascertainment of emptiness? It's a process of doing this meditation practice. If you stick to the prescribed meditation correctly and don't mix up the mere I with inherent existence in terms of being the object of negation, you reach a point of what's called a mere negation, which is the emptiness of true existence. It appears directly to a reliable, cognized perceiving it. So that's your mind. Inferentially reliable cognizer, a conceptual appearance of emptiness appears to the mind. Underline the word conceptual. There's two different types of seeing emptiness. One is conceptually, with clarity. That's called an inferential experience of emptiness because it isn't seeing emptiness directly. That's the other kind of emptiness. But it is a valid way to see emptiness because you have a reliable mind who's identified correctly the object of negation, not mixing it up with the mere I, and you're following the prescriptive meditation practice, which we'll learn in the next two sessions, seven fold reasoning, diamond slivers, and dependent arising. So what appears is emptiness. So this is all, by the way, I'm making a point according to the sutra system. For those of you who might practice Tantra, it's the deity, which is the basis of emptiness, that appears to the inferential realization of emptiness. That might sound a little convoluted, but hopefully for some of you who maybe practice Tantra, that makes some kind of sense. Certainly can clarify that a bit more as we move along. So, the next thing to sort of understand as we've now refined the object of negation, that's what we just did in the last section, is we're ready to learn. Um, we've already learned what this means in our first session, that and I mentioned it just a moment ago as well, that what we're analyzing in these meditations is the ultimate, not the conventional. So I'm underscoring again here, avoid negating conventional existence. That's not our object of meditation in any of these meditation practices. So ultimate analysis is looking at ultimate truths, ultimate mode of existence. Conventional analysis, which does exist, looks at what are called veiled truths and utilizes conventional modes of existence. Um, so there's many examples we can give of what that looks like. Um, but they all relate to things like I make a few things up. Like so, if I'm analyzing conventionally, like some sort of athletic game, like a soccer game, like a foul, like in a soccer game, or how government policy works, or how a computer works, or even how personal relationships work. Those are all conventional analysis. They have nothing to do with ultimate analysis. So it might be self um, explanatory, but it's something to just clarify um, and make clear. So when we're doing ultimate analysis, it's like, does John exist from his own side? Can an inherently existent John be found as one with or separate from his body or mind? These are the kind of things we're going to find out in these meditation practices. And as we start to explore this topic, what should start to arise in your mind, going all the way back to understanding to some degree the Four Noble Truths and how things exist or don't exist, and they cause all suffering, then one should start to develop a natural desire to want to understand the mode of ultimate existence. You want to go beyond understanding things conventionally. Understanding and seeing and analyzing things conventionally isn't hard. So you want to, even when you learn about like how everything exists in a mere nominal way. Okay, but you're not satisfied with that. That's what should motivate you to move towards doing emptiness meditations, understanding because everything only dependently arises that if I could see and understand that its ultimate mode of existence, then that should start to give open the door to how I could change experiencing the moment by moment reality of what's happening in my mind, what I'm doing with my speech, and what I'm doing with my actions. They're the key to not only ending suffering, but creating happiness, real joy, and negating the opposites of those. Um, so this is something that is what we're exploring. Are those kinds of ultimate questions when we look to put reasoning analysis to any object, the I, I just talked about John, that's me, or it could be some other object, another person, another being of some kind, another object like a table or chair. All of these are objects that you can put under ultimate analysis. It's all available to you. So we're only using reasoning analysis when we do ultimate, um, uh, when we're looking at the ultimate mode of existence. So that's why, as we end up getting through tonight's session and just getting very clear about these points, we should be able to go into the next session and the last one after that with a super focused understanding of why we want to do these meditations and how to do them, and kind of go at it and have some productive results. So, here we're going to be talking about now the reasoning and conventional analysis. Here, when we talk about, we've already been talking about these two things, sorry, a bit. Um, and we talked about conventional analysis being those kinds of, you can come up with 1,000 examples of what that looks like. Um, but when we talk about reasoning analysis of the ultimate, we can make the statement that there's nothing that can withstand that. What does that mean? That means that there's nothing, like I was just rattling on about how you could put anything under that, through that analytical process and come up with anything other than not finding its inherent self-existence. We cannot, I challenge you, if you do these meditations properly, you cannot isolate or find a specific independent object that any word or image and form refers to. So this goes back to that manifested fourth link in the 12 links of dependent origination, understanding where that comes from as one is actually born into, say, a human form. And that ripening karma I talked about, that's constantly going through your mind and driving every moment of experience through sense consciousnesses, including your um, actual mind consciousness. So there's the five sense consciousnesses and the mind consciousness. Then there's constantly the present of words and or images that is getting in the way of us seeing, and mistakenly so, because we're identifying them as having inherent self-existence. They don't. So this goes back to also be sure you don't confuse the two. There is a mere nominal existing I. It does exist, but not ultimately. You can't isolate or find it when you're in doing that type of meditative equipoise. So only the lack or emptiness of an inherent existing thing is what you're going to find. So here, as I talked about John, the goal is to find John's emptiness, eliminating what's called the elaboration of inherent existence. So this does not mean, once again, that the conventional object is found to be non-existent. And I can't underscore this next sentence enough. This cannot be determined by ultimate analysis as it doesn't search for it. That's not what we're searching for in ultimate, and therefore it cannot find it. So this is really an important point. Okay, so now I see something in the chat. Okay, here we go. Okay. Yeah, so I'll talk about that momentarily. There's a note in the chat about how does it relate to space, and that's coming up in my talk here. I'm going to put that into context. So um, we'll move on from there. So here I just want to make the point, and this starts to get to the question I posed earlier about like, okay, then where are karmic seeds planted or imprints, karmic imprints, where are they planted if something doesn't inherently exist? So I'm going to talk about this in a little bit more detail in a few minutes, but Here I just want to say that for some Buddhist systems, elaborations, because I just use that word that's our goal here, to eliminate elaborations. They make the mistake, I have to call it that, of identifying elaborations as not just meaning lacking inherent existence, but all elaborations of all existence. So that is where other Buddhist systems create, and I'm going to give you an overview of that shortly, create within their systems of emptiness some kind of existent, inherent existent um, mm, aspect of that exists within ourselves in order for there to be for them so that karma can function and so that what we've been talking about can actually happen. But for Mahayamikas, especially Prasangika Mahayamikas, which is a school that we follow, they say that freedom from elaborations refer to the elimination of dualistic appearance for a particular mind. So that's a non-affirming negative that is found. That's what is realized. And emptiness, this is important, I put it in bold, is an object of mind. It's not a mere nothingness. And Chandrakirti, I'll just want to read what he says from one of his texts about, um, he talks about uh, the Chittamatra system of tenets. That's some people know that as a Yogacaran system. Um, they have an inherent existing what's called foundational consciousness. That is the main mechanism that allows things to dependently arise and then also for karma to function. But in the Prasangika system, Mahayamika system, um, non-duality, because I'm focusing in on this, dualistic appearance. What does that mean in this system? It means it refers to one of two things, depending on where you are in your study of the topic. But and it means both at the same time. It refers to the non-existence of the extremes of permanence and annihilation. So that's what the middle way is. When we talk about the middle way, it's that singular way that's free from the dualistic experience of all things as either being nihilistically non-existent or absolutism, everything being inherently existent. And that's the middle way. It's not one or the other. This is important to know. Um, and the other thing it refers to when we talk about elimination of dualistic appearance, this is when non-appearance of a cognizing subject, meaning someone trying to experience emptiness, which is its object. So subject and object during a direct perception of emptiness. We call that the third path in the five paths of Buddhism, seeing emptiness directly, the path of seeing. Such a non-appearance um, um, does not entail non-existence. So there's not an appearance to the mind. There's only um, emptiness, but that is an object of the mind. It might sound like a little hard to wrap your mind around, but this is what we're talking about. The subject and object are non-dual in that moment. There's no sense of self in that mistaken way, meaning inherently existing way, and also the object emptiness itself is appearing in a way that has no elaboration. So this is also what we're talking about eliminating dualistic appearance. So this is all part of what one has to really kind of get clear on and understand, study, work on. So let me just make sure I stay on track. Okay. All right. So here, um, I just want to give a couple of examples of what I'm talking about here. So I'm going to use an what's called an ARIA's investigation. Hopefully everybody knows what an ARIA is. That's somebody who's been doing emptiness meditation successfully, has reached that point that I just mentioned that Chandra Kirti shares with us about the experience of seeing emptiness directly. So once one successfully reaches that experience, one actually then becomes an Arya. You now are no longer an ordinary being. You've actually reached the first Bodhisattva Bhumi level. So an Arya's reasoning analysis, analyzing the ultimate, finds only ultimate truth, emptiness. It does not find conventional or veiled uh, objects such as tables or persons, and thus can neither establish or negate their existence. They're just not even experiencing it in a way that we know dualistically, conceptually. It's hard to put into words, but it sort of underscores the point I was just trying to make. Another example, this one may be a little bit more tangible, a visual consciousness. So we have these five sense consciousnesses, right? We've got visual consciousness, audio consciousness, smell, taste, and touch. So this example, since our visual consciousness does not know the sound of music, it cannot negate the existence of a melody because sound is not within the purview of what a visual consciousness can apprehend. It's the same thing when we are with single pointed concentration. We are repeatedly meditating on emptiness, and eventually we reach a point where we can stay in a place where it arises directly to us. Um, and if that's our singular focus, then there's nothing else appearing to us. So it's the same as the analogy with a visual consciousness. So don't fall into the trap of thinking that because a direct perception of emptiness doesn't experience themselves or the subject and object appear empty simultaneously. They see it directly and all phenomena directly. It doesn't mean because it's not in the purview of its single pointed concentration that all of a sudden a table and a person don't exist. You have to sort of try to wipe that from what you might think, because that isn't what's happening. So this is an important point to make as well. And so here, after all this sort of chatter, these are three contemplations to reinforce this kind of understanding. Number one, not being able to bear ultimate analysis and being undermined or refuted by that analysis. So this is like a dog. A dog cannot bear ultimate analysis, meaning you can't find its inherent self-existence, but it doesn't, but its conventional existence is not negated or undermined by that analysis. Simple, but this is something to reflect on. And then not being seen or known by an Arya's pristine wisdom, what we just gave the example of a meditative equipoise, and being seen or known as non-existent by that wisdom. So that's like a buffalo is not seen at that moment that an Arya's wisdom of meditative equipoise, but it is not seen as non-existent by that wisdom because that conventional truth of a buffalo are not within the purview of that wisdom. It's what I just talked about. It helps, refine and give you clarity as you go into emptiness meditation yourself. Helps you to avoid negating the wrong object of negation. And then the third thing to contemplate is not being found by reasoning analysis analyzing the ultimate and being found as non-existent. So this is like a politician is not found by ultimate analysis, but he or she is not found to be non-existent by that analysis. Again, because that's not We're not looking for their conventional existence, if you will. So um, here, um, I'll move to the next topic. I'm trying to move as quickly as possible so that we don't all fall asleep, but hopefully some of this is engaging. But here we talk about an Arya's pristine wisdom. We were just talking about this a moment ago, but here we talk about a little further about what pristine wisdom of an Arya is. It's a being who knows emptiness and finds emptiness. That does not make emptiness inherently existent because it finds it. That's an important statement. Emptiness is found by this analysis, but it's not found to be inherently existent. You can't find emptiness cannot be found under correct reasoning analysis. Inherent existence cannot be found by correct reason analysis of any object, including yourself. So this is important. And then it's also important to note that emptiness itself is empty. If you were to make the object of your reasoning analysis, analyzing the ultimate, make your object emptiness itself, it too cannot withstand analysis, but it doesn't mean it's non-existent. That the emptiness of emptiness is what is found. So this is the next point that we're making. So here we'll talk a little bit more about the Yogacharans. They believe in there being a foundational consciousness that inherently exists. Um, so they basically say that external objects don't inherently exist, that they are something that springs from, if you will, um, the foundational consciousness that does have karmic imprints within it that one then manifests. So when they say everything in phenomena is like an illusion, they mean it literally. So then they are relying on something that inherently exists within reality to make their system work, which is this thing called the foundational consciousness, which they say every sentient being in all of samsaric existence has. And I'm simplifying it. There's a lot more detail one can put to that. But a prasangika, which is the system we're talking about trying to zero in on, refutes self and phenomena as inherently existing with ultimate analysis. So when we get to doing the meditations in the next two sessions, we will be putting both phenomena through diamond slivers and self, the I, me, and my, through the sevenfold reasoning under ultimate analysis. But at the same time, remember, because we're focused on that correct object of negation, we never make the mere I that does nominally exist, unlike the Yogacharans who don't accept that, but we say exists. So I put in all caps there. We accept what is conventionally established in the world, conventionally meaning the mere I that is merely imputed. So sometimes it's referred to as a mere label. So Jason Kappa next tells us conventional analysis, what it is not. He says this conventional analysis is not as follows: not being satisfied with just a conventional imputation of arising and going, one employs a method of analysis, searching for the way in which the object of a conventional imputation exists. So here he's using a negative way grammatically to state that what conventional analysis is not is that energy I was talking about previously about not being satisfied with conventional imputation, even understanding the mere I or labeling of arising and going. One then wants to pursue understanding, finding an analytical, a proper, legitimate, skillful analytical tool that one can use to find the way so-called conventional objects really exist. So then this is something to understand. So next, we basically say that ultimate analysis is done in one of the following three ways. The prescribed cures, as I talk about in our framing out earlier. Sevenfold reasoning. It investigates specifically whether an object is inherently one with its basis of imputation. So, like the idea of I being imputed on the aggregates, or inherently different from it. There are five other reasonings that go with that, make up seven. Those are the two main ones. Diamond slivers examines if impermanent things are produced from self, other, both, or causelessly, meaning randomly. Dependent arising refers to all phenomena because all of them come into existence dependently, be it by causal dependence, mutual dependence, or dependent designation. Also, dependent arisings are the basis that lack having the inherent nature of ceasing. They lack having that arising, discontinuing, permanence, coming, going, difference, and identity. So these are the three meditative practices that we will employ, the so-called ultimate analysis, using these three different variants of reasoning, analyzing the ultimate. So that's what's coming up. Um, Make sure I don't fall behind here in my written notes as well. And just to say, conventional truths are posited from the viewpoint of conditionally without analysis or investigation. So this just is saying that we habitually are always experiencing things without analyzing them. You can analyze things conventionally, the way I mentioned earlier, but it's still not exactly the same as analyzing things ultimately. So you can analyze, for example, um, you know, has your electric bill been paid? Is a person guilty or innocent of a crime that they've been accused of? Rocket science, artificial intelligence, the best way to grow broccoli. Um, These are all in the realm of conventional analysis. So you can do analysis again. I mentioned it earlier, but just sort of underscoring it. Um, but it's not the same as ultimate analysis. Even whether the rockets, if you take those same topics, like take rockets or broccoli, and if you ask the question, if you posit the question, do they exist from their own side, or do they exist by merely being imputed? That question is in the realm of ultimate analysis. So you should be able to see very clearly now the difference between the two. Should be no confusion, especially because I'm repeating myself. That's called reinforcement teaching. So this is what we're talking about. Um, so next, that kind of brings us to a little more subtle point, and this is where we're going to get to bringing up space as a analogy. The Buddha said the following. Ooh, I got to change the page. They see in the manner of non-seeing. Non-seeing is the supreme seeing. Supreme seeing. So here, emptiness is compared to space. The perfection of wisdom says, in talking about comparing it to space, the Tathagata teaches that one who does not see forms does not see feelings, does not see discriminations, does not see intentions, does not see consciousness, mind, or sentience. See the Dharma, suchness. So do those all sound familiar? Form, feelings, those are those name and form that manifest from and the fourth link of dependent origination. So Tathagatas teach that one who has seen emptiness directly doesn't see them inherently. Remember that. That's what we're talking about. Don't start mixing it and conflating it with the mere I, right? So continue, analyze how space is seen as in the expression by sentient beings in the word space is seen. The Tathagata teaches that seeing the Dharma is also like that. The seeing cannot be expressed by another example. So emptiness is seen, I put this in bold, by not seeing inherent existence. Emptiness is seen by not seeing inherent existence and not seeing veiled conventional truths, such as the aggregates that they are based. Remember, that's not the object of your single point of concentration. So you don't see veiled truths when you are seeing emptiness directly. The example is space. So space is the absence of tangible obstructions, which would be known if it were present. The not knowing of tangible obstructions, the unseen, is the knowing of space, the seen. So this is the analogy to seeing emptiness. Emptiness is seen, is like space. The not seen is the tangible obstructions. And then from a karmic point of view, they're called the obscurations to seeing omniscience or seeing emptiness directly before one reaches a state of omniscience. So this is important. So in the perspective of, remember, an Arya's wisdom, that's someone who has seen emptiness directly. Um, they neither see veiled truths nor inherent existence, which is underscoring the point I've been trying to make all evening. Very, very important. However, it doesn't mean that veiled truths do not exist. They are known in post-meditative time, because remember, this experience of seeing emptiness directly has to be done in deep meditative equipoise. So post-meditatively, one can then experience conventional mere eye functioning nominal selves of phenomena and beings. This is not to be disputed. So don't think that Buddhas perceive only emptiness. They know both truths. So you're not giving up that if you give up conventional truth and don't keep it conjoined with ultimate truths in terms of an experience that one has in deep meditation and then post meditation, you fall into nihilism. This is like you miss the whole point of emptiness.
So,
So
John, do you mind? Sorry, I was just typing you that question, so you were reading my mind again. Then, where does the space analogy come in? When you talk about space as
the absence of tangible obstructions, the
which
scene.
is emptiness.
That's right. That's the scene. But it's
Hmm.
like space, and it can only be like space because space is something that, analogously speaking, we don't there doesn't appear to be an object there. And actually the 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 seeing emptiness directly is one that is is analogous to that. There isn't a positive affirming object that appears to one's mind conceptually. It's the absence of that. So
Right, but
that
with your seeing emptiness, are you only seeing it from the aspect of ultimate versus conventional? Because you said you have to you have to hold on to them together. But isn't
yes, but
emptiness
I
without?
said post meditatively.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, as we're
Okay.
still sentient and we're human in human
Yeah.
form,
Okay.
we perfect our meditative equipoise and experience emptiness as like analogous to seeing space. And then when we arise from that, we know emptiness. We know it. We just experience it directly, but we then can also still,
Put it into
uh,
context. Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
embrace conventional reality.
Okay. Great. Thank you for that clarification. I think
Sure.
someone's put something in the chat too. I'll go.
Yeah, yeah. It's just someone saying then that that's like the path of habituation. So yes, once one sees emptiness directly, one um, is like we're talking about the human form. We're talking about a system here that the Buddha gave us that humans can practice, whether it's Sutrayana, but especially in Tantrayana practice, but in both. once one reaches the first bodhisattva bhumi level, and that's when you see emptiness directly, you're doing that in meditative equipoise. Don't forget that. Then that has to end at some point, and you come back to your ordinary experience of things. Um, and so you repeatedly go back, not just as you're trying to reach a state of seeing emptiness directly, as I talked about earlier, but once you actually do, you're on the first bodhisattva bhumi. And there are some wonderful texts. The one I always recommend, I mentioned this even last night in another class. Um, you can read Illuminating the Intent by Jason Kappa, which is a commentary on Chandrakirti's analysis of Nagarjuna's entering the middle way. All three texts give a beautiful, but especially Chandrakirti's and Jason Kappa's, detailed um, presentation revealing what you actually are working on each one of the bodhisattva bhumis. There's 10 of them that then lead to Buddhahood and how they're a refining of the six perfections or 10 perfections, actually. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. And that's the path of habituation that one practices, whether you're a Sutrayana Bodhisattva. Looks a little different than Tantric practices, but you're still moving through the 10 Bodhisattva bhumis. Wes, go ahead. You can ask your question.
Yeah, thank you, John. I guess my question is, well, it's one question, but I just need you to like, you know, affirm that my understanding is correct before then the question springs off it. Um, so from what I understand, and from reading that same text, illuminating the intent, is that at the higher boomies, is that um even the appearance of inherent existence, it stops being made by the individual. So, like a Buddha still perceives that appearance of inherent existence, but it's not his own appearance making. He's perceiving it on the basis of ordinary beings' appearance making. Is that correct?
Yes, because you have to underscore that you reach a state of no more learning, what that parenthetically what that means is that you've removed all obscurations to ordinary appearance, but ordinary appearance means inherently existing appearance.
Oh,
And so from the Buddhist side, he doesn't see anything inherently existing. It's impossible. And what that means conceptually is a little hard for us to wrestle with. So as one reads even a text like Illuminating the Intent, even bodhisattvas, especially through the first seven bhumis, is still holding on to very subtle, refined, karmically remains of karmic imprints from that, going all the way back to that first link in the 12 links of dependent origination it caused that innate experience. And so this is what one is resolving when you're in those very, very high meditative practices on the path of habituation. But go ahead, you were going to ask a question based off of that.
yeah. So then, well, I guess okay. So then I guess if then a Buddha then is understanding the world, then I mean, I guess because like when you're saying that the Buddha is not perceiving inherent existence anymore, but like people on the boomies still are. Um, but then like conventional existence, you defined that earlier as the appearance of inherent existence. But then the appearance of inherent existence is karmic habituation. So then a Buddha has removed that. Um, so I guess then my question is
They've
like,
removed the appearance of inherent existence, correct?
yes.
But
So
not,
then I
but
guess
not, but not, but not the nominal mere functioning I or yeah. So go ahead.
okay. Um, but then I guess what basis is the Buddha performing that on? Because if he's performing
On
on
the
the
Go
yeah,
ahead.
I was gonna say if he's performing it on the basis of how ordinary beings perceive the world, that must mean that the Buddha already affirms ordinary beings before he affirms what they perceive. He needs
He
to see
doesn't
ordinary.
he He does it on the basis of designation, which for a human being is each individual's unique moment by moment mirror appearing I, which is the basis of designation, the five aggregates plus their consciousness.
Okay,
And
so the Buddha, okay, so the Buddha is
and
still,
at the higher levels, that same basis of designation, he's able to interact with beings who are like, if we're talking about Buddhas at the Bodhisattvas at high bhumi levels, um, directly to to their subtle body and mind. For other beings like insects and humans and animals, then it's in a more coarse form. That gets into talking about the nature of the appearance of the aggregates of an individual in the six realms. The only realm that there isn't a form aggregate is, and only the four name aggregates. Remember, feeling, individual discrimination, activities, and consciousness is the formless realm. So there's always a basis of designation. It's not that someone doesn't exist. It's that we misinterpret the way they exist. And that's what a
okay,
Buddha is interacting with. But from his side, he sees that basis of designation without the mistaken appearing inherent existence.
okay. And then that is, but then isn't that conventional existence then that appearance of inherent existence?
No. The appearance of conventional existence is the way that we mistakenly experience things. And when we say that they exist, that's because we experience them. They exist, but it doesn't mean they ultimately exist.
Uh, so then if conventional existence is mistaken,
No,
then,
no,
oh,
no. I didn't
okay,
say
sorry.
conventional existence is mistaken. I said that our experience um, of things uh, in a way where we say that they inherently exist and believe they inherently exist when they only nominally exist.
Okay. So, okay,
You
so,
have to refine my advice, Dr. John, is to refine your understanding of something we haven't talked about yet, which is it's the next topic, which we won't have time for tonight. We'll finish it up at the third session, but we have to understand refining your the what's called the object of negation by the path and the object of negation by reasoning. And we don't have time to get into it, but tune in, well, because that will be the first thing we talk about in our next session. And also, I I highly recommend the rest of my prescription is that you start to actually do the meditations on emptiness, one of them, whichever one that you feel you can really click with. I picked the three sort of big ones that His Holiness the Dalai Lama recommends. There are others, but Sevenfold Reasoning, Diamond Slivers, and then Dependent Arising. Because one is very strong in negating the mistaken experience of I, me, mine. That's Sevenfold Reasoning. Diamond Slivers is very strong in negating the experience of phenomena and also self as a result, because self is part of phenomena. And then, which is as a meditation, it's different than the I, me, my sevenfold reasoning one. And then the dependent arising one is sort of the king of all of them because it applies to everything in such a pointed way. That especially will help clarify the mind twister that you and I are in the middle of trying to talk through.
yeah, yeah, I agree, and thank you. And I have done I believe it's the diamond slivers. That's the one where like you analyze that the self is neither is the same as the aggregates nor different than the aggregates. Correct? That's the diamond slivers.
Diamond slivers is either the same as self or others. The sevenfold reasoning is the one that has to do with the aggregates.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so I guess it's the tenfold reasoning that I've done.
Yeah.
Um,
And not to like I don't know if you could see me, but my hands are like together, meaning I have ultimate respect for you. But you should know that clearly by
mhm,
having done it so much that you're getting it, or you're just in click with it, like I said before. But try to find one of them that you can really rock with, you know.
mhm.
I
Yeah,
don't know. Yeah.
true. And I guess the thing is like the sort of like what I've found in that meditation, it's just hard for me to then connect it to, I guess, what the higher things on the path, or like, what the path is saying in regards to, you know, I guess in terms of how conventional existence relates to then dependent arising. Because it's kind of, it seems like conventional existence, I'm confused as to whether conventional existence is synonymous with dependent arising, or if conventional existence is the positing of a name onto a dependently arisen phenomenon.
Yeah, the latter, because I can give you quotes Nagarjuna, uh, where he and also the Buddha, where uh, all the aspects of conventional dependent arising events that we know, and I mentioned them tonight, even in passing, um, that they don't exist inherently. Sometimes the confusion comes for us practitioners who look at scriptures closely. They tend to leave the word inherently out, but that's all they're talking about. That's the whole point of my talk tonight is don't conflate the two. So that also goes for all phenomena that dependently arises. It does not inherently exist. It only exists nominally on a conventional level. On an ultimate level, it has no inherent existence. And the only way to really get clarity about that from an ascertainment point of view, I talked about it earlier, but I probably went over it a little bit too quickly, is that you can't just analyze it intellectually and conceptually. The ascertainment, because that's a slippery slope. It comes and goes in terms of clarity from moment to moment, depending on what you're reading, etc. You need to ascertain through doing meditative equipoise to the best of your ability. So we know that's part of what we try to perfect in these kind of meditation practices isn't just our understanding of the topic and doing the meditation correctly, but the quality of how we do it, which requires what? Shamatha, or single point of concentration, so that we don't lose it. So this is what, Dr. John talking again here. And again, I know Wes, we're in a group, but you and I are talking about the things that are easy to have sort of slip slide in and out of our focused mind and going, oh yeah, I see that clearly. Then, oh no, wait a minute. I don't, now it's not there. That's because we're lacking actual ascertainment of the object of negation. And that's where that's the ding, 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 ding indicator that one has to, if you understand emptiness conceptually and intellectually, got to do more actual meditations on emptiness, and then the arising of emptiness will become very, very clear. These kinds of questions will dissolve also into clarity about like what conventional existence is once you're off the meditation cushion, because that's not the focus of your meditation when you're doing emptiness meditation. Hopefully that ramble makes a little bit of sense, but we could
No,
talk more about that, right?
yeah, it does. And thank you very much.
Okay, okay. Um, so, as I just said, any other questions, by the way, because we're getting towards the end of this session, so I didn't even finish. I've got a bunch more pages to go, probably 5 or 6 pages. And part of what I was going to talk about next, I just alluded to with Wes. We'll pick it up next time, which is this topic here, the path existing object and the reason non-existing objects. And then we're going to go into the um, And understanding that is really, really important. Um, because what does exist is the mind grasping inherent existence. But inherent existence never existed. So it's really, that's why we have to negate it. And then that alleviates the mind grasping at something that doesn't exist. So we use probing awareness for that. We'll talk more about this next time. We do have a process and what it is like. And then we're going to get into a discussion of the two kinds of self. And we're going to get into a discussion about the mere I. It's really important to understand this. And then we could actually get to this question, who carries karmic seeds? And here I have a pretty bad photograph, but I was able to put it in here, which is a discussion of the various tenet systems in Buddhism and what they say is the person. And we can go over that pretty quickly, although that probably will take, I won't do any recounting next time, but going back to this, starting here and going through these three or four, probably take about a half an hour at the beginning of the next session. And then I'm going to want to do a focus view on sevenfold reasoning. And then we'll do a focus view on diamond slivers. And then a last session, we're going to focus on doing dependent arising. And we'll actually go through meditative steps that one needs to do in this so-called, not so-called, but this reasoned analysis process. And then how to take that, you're doing that first in a learning capacity, like in a class like this, then you're doing some reflection on it, then you're bringing it into meditation. And then you're bringing, once you get a good grasp on the results of that analysis, you bring it into single pointed concentrative focus, meaning the result of that analysis, and you just reside with it. And the longer you can stay there, the clearer emptiness will become to your mind. So this is essentially I just underscored, not underscored, I just went through the rest of what we will cover in the last two sessions. It's a lot to take in, but you know, um, I hope I hope it makes some sort of sense and it didn't get too convoluted. I tried to keep it as clear and direct as possible. Many of the texts on this are brilliant, but they can sometimes make you feel like, why am I reading this and what is being said, etc. So my goal in this course is to try to bring it down to a level that we can maybe all relate to it somewhat. So I think that's it for tonight. Unless there's any other questions, I'm certainly willing to take one more um, question. So yeah, one comment is like, would you like to suggest some homework? Um, the homework will come in the next session when I actually take. I'll send. Oh gosh, I forgot to post. I did this
Yeah.
last time.
So, yeah, John, that
Yeah,
was going to be my comment. I listened to
yeah.
your Zoom last week. If you
Then
send
I
them to
didn't.
me,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
but I'll just send it to me and I'll just link it to each class, to the
Okay,
class
good.
description. Yeah.
All right. So I will give that to Gloria, and she'll thank you, Gloria.
Yeah, and
Um,
it'll show up on any date, so it'll just be every
yeah,
time you open up
it'll
whatever
be
this
there.
class is, it'll be there. Yep.
So on the calendar,
Yep.
what you'll end up seeing, Gloria will actually put the documents there, so you can go
In
and
the
look at them.
description itself. Yep.
Yeah, in the description itself on the calendar about the event. So that will be great because, Karen, who asked that question, that will be the homework is maybe review what I just presented on the screen. And then really the meat and potatoes of homework will become clear through the next two sessions because we're going to actually focus on the prescriptive um, antidote to ending suffering, which are doing these specific meditations. So we'll actually delve into them, go over what each one of them are, and then give us a little taste of what that meditative process looks like. And then that becomes the ultimate, not to make a pun on our topic, the ultimate homework for you guys to do post this course. Work on your meditation practices, and they will start to give you solid grounding under your feet of having a real ascertainment of inferential understanding of emptiness. And then eventually, for some of you, I hope you will be able, eventually you all will, if you stay with it, be able to see emptiness directly. Um, but I think that's got to be it for tonight. So we should end the recording.